You are listening to the Move the Dirt podcast. The information provided in this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical, legal, or any other professional advice. You should always seek advice from an appropriately qualified and experienced professional.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining us. Today I'm joined by Lee Copus, otherwise known as the Kent Carnivore. So Lee was introduced to me by a very good friend of mine, and he has an absolutely fascinating story to tell about his health and how his health has been affected for the better by a diet, namely the carnivore diet. So firstly, Lee, thank you ever so much for joining me. It's really good to have you on today. As I say, you've got a fascinating story to tell. So would you perhaps like to start off by introducing yourself before we get into specific questions?
Yeah. So my name is Lee. I'm from Kent, the Garden of England, hence the name on my channel on YouTube. A lot of people conflate my name being Kent with Lee because I think it's a very popular name over in the States. But my story pretty much starts in 2012. So right up until that point, I was what I thought was just a normal kid, normal health, not sort of any pressing issues or symptoms. But in 2012, I had some bloody diarrhea in the beginning. That's kind of my first sign that my health wasn't optimal. And so at that point, I had a couple of minor ones. And then during 2012, I had like some slightly worse symptoms, which just did look like bloody diarrhea. And so I went down to my GP and obviously tried to figure out what was wrong with me. So went about getting my diagnosis. They mentioned that I should be eating a balanced diet. Lots of whole foods. They put emphasis on grains because I spoke to a couple of different doctors before getting my diagnosis, and they both said fiber, eat little and often, and variety, but they both mentioned grains. And that's pretty much what I was already doing in many ways, but I was just a bit more conscientious about this going forward because I was obviously a bit concerned now about my health. So that's what I did. That was the first sort of information I took home, cleaned out my diet a little bit more and just ate sort of 5-ish, smallish meals kind of thing. I went up to the hospital that they referred me to, and that's where I had a sigmoid endoscopy. And so that's basically a probing device with some pincers to take biopsies. They also have a camera on there, and so you kind of have a little look. And I was awake, I didn't accept the anaesthetic, so you can see on the screen start blowing up parts of your digestive tract, and they sort of go further up, and they're just having a little look around and seeing that it was actually classed as a mild proctitis first, but this is really essentially ulcerative colitis, and it was restricted to my colon, which is essentially what it is. So Crohn's disease is quite similar, but it can affect anywhere from gum to bum. And so this was exclusively in my colon. Very low end and mild to begin with. And so that was quite a good thing. And I went home and thought, well, I know what I'm doing. I'm eating the right foods, little and often, plenty of fiber, etc. So I did this for 2 years and things actually slowly got worse. And so in 2014, that's when I went back to my GP, saw a different guy down there at the same practice. Much of the same stuff. They said, yep, you're eating the right stuff. Fiber, whole grains, little and often. And I came out this time with some drugs. And so it was like a mild steroid treatment, very typical to address ulcerative colitis. Well, it's not addressing it meaningfully, but it's addressing symptomology. And so I did feel a benefit of that. You know, at first you get some relief when you're flaring up. You feel like your frequencies aren't as urgent and you're just going less. And so typically in the very beginning, I was going sort of 5-ish, 6, sometimes 7 times during a flare up, which is when you feel run down, when you have your symptoms. And then I would go in and out of remission and feel like a normal guy. And of course, as time went on, the periods of time where I was in remission diminished somewhat. My symptoms got worse and my disease was spreading further up and was getting worse and worse all the way throughout my colon, but I didn't really know this at the time. And so, like I say, the drugs did have a positive effect at first, but it was interesting as more time sort of went by, it was almost like I wasn't taking the medications anymore. The bowel frequency movements crept back up again, symptoms got worse. And I was going 15, 16, sometimes 20 odd times a day during a flare up towards 17. And I just a little bit confused, you know, I'm taking these meds that I've been given. I listen to the dietary advice. I'm following this quite diligently. And so why am I getting worse? So it was a little bit confusing to me. But basically 2017 arrives And this is when I had my worst flare up. So basically, I went straight into having sort of 15, 20 bowel movements instantly. Towards the end, before I was hospitalized, I was going 30 times a day for 2 days straight, just relentless. So I'm going back and forth from the toilet, losing a lot of blood, a lot of water. Nothing was staying in my system, including the medication. So I was actually seeing evidence of fragments of medication intact. Yeah, so it was just crazy. Everything was being sort of flushed, and it felt like I was being poisoned and that my body wasn't being able to get rid of the threat inside the body. That's just how it felt. Very relentless. I was exhausted, just losing a lot of iron and electrolytes. And I remember at the time I wasn't driving. My parents were in the States. And so I rang my nan. I said, this is my situation. I don't think I've got another day in me. I just felt like I can't see I'm going to get through another day like this. It was just so bad. So she said, yeah, we'll take you to the hospital. And so I presented very emaciated, dehydrated, low in iron. They could see I was in a bit of a mess. So they hooked me up with intravenous drip with electrolytes, but they also supplied me with additional steroids to lower inflammation in that moment so that they could do another investigatory and see what's going on. So they took me downstairs again to the unit where I was last time to perform another sigmoid endoscopy. And this time they were pretty serious. I mean, they were joking and laughing a little bit to keep things light in the first time round.
Sure.
It was a new experience for me. This time it started off a little bit like that, and instantly it was like, well, okay, get more specialists coming in. We're all like looking at the screen, and they were just ignoring me and getting on with their work and talking between them about different protocols. Turns out basically my whole colon was riddled now. There was no patches really, meaningful patches where there wasn't kind of evidence of disease. And so what they said is that we have this immune suppressant drug, right? It was a trial drug, but very, very potent. They said, we can trial you on this. We've got to stick you on it for a number of days, but we can't go over just because of the nature of this drug. It's quite dangerous. You're lowering your defenses, obviously. The thinking behind this, of course, is that this is an autoimmune disease. If we can suppress the function of your your immune system, then we hope that we can get you out of trouble, hopefully not get sick, and then we'll put you on more medication, etc. But this wasn't the case. And so they actually kept me on the drug for 2 days longer than they were supposed to. The specialist came in and said, I'm sorry, but it's just not taken. You're going to have to come down first thing in the morning. We're going to perform an emergency surgery. And so he explained, because I had some funny things going on as well towards the end, but he explained that what was happening is that I was like ridding my own colon. I was on my way to perforation. So in certain patches where it was really, really bad, it was just shedding slowly but surely. And I was in a real troublesome situations, hence the emergency surgery. They brought some stoma nurses round. So at the time, I had no idea what a stoma was. For anybody at home that doesn't know what a stoma is, that's basically the last part of your intestine that protrudes through your abdominal wall, which would then have a bag fashioned over the top. And so think stoma, stomach. I have the last part of my ileum, that terminal ileum. And so I've just basically had my entire colon removed. And that's what they did that morning. And so I went down into surgery and they took that out. I think it was about 6 hours, the first surgery. Woke up feeling quite groggy, of course, and moments go by and you start to feel more and more pain. And so they try and manage that. As I came out of ICU and I was in there for like 2.5 days, you become a little bit more with it. And I definitely felt like I was in a better position. At least I didn't feel like I was poisoned. I wasn't feeling pain in terms of my disease. That was now gone, of course, because they've taken the organ out that was affected. But what I would say, I was very kind of out of it and very weak. I had an epidural because the scar was quite sizable, and it was a very invasive surgery. And this was my first surgery. So about another couple of days goes by. Now I'm in my own room and they want to try me on food. Now, interestingly, the advice before, of course, was lots of plants, lots of fiber, little and often. And all of a sudden now I'm in a position where they don't want an obstruction. So they say, don't eat any fiber. We're not going to feed you any fiber. Here's a list of foods you can eat. You can have white rice. You can have white bread. You can have some well-cooked potato. You can have a bit of cheese. You can have Pringles. Pringles are like a superfood, apparently, for people with a stoma, because it's fiber-free, it's starchy, and there's salt. And so it will stodge up your output. And that's what they like to see. And they gave you kind of like these pureed vegetables. So it's like they took carrots and things and then they mash it into a puree and then put it in the shape of a carrot like you're a child. It's really quite strange. Right. So obviously they've kind of just pulverized it. So there's no real sort of risks involved, I suppose, in terms of obstructions. But they trialed me on some white bread and butter. That was the first thing I ate. I remember the butter was out of this world. I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, that tastes so good, because I was obviously fasted for a number of days, and before that point my body wasn't accepting any nutrition at all. It was just kind of like in and out, and
Right.
just losing
Was
weight very,
was
very
that
rapidly.
Lee, was that regardless of what you ate at that point? It was just going straight through?
Yeah, absolutely everything. The medications, things like food that I would chew on, some juices. I was juicing cabbages. I heard stories and things. I was online very, very desperate, looking for answers, thinking like, come on, I need something. I need to get out of trouble. But
So
nothing was taking. And so, that was the trend. And right up until I was in the hospital, and of course then surgery. And that's
so
where I am now.
even though prior to you going in for surgery you were getting worse, the medical advice, by the sounds of it, had been consistent?
Yes.
It
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
could
exactly.
see the deterioration, but there was no change of medical approach.
No change whatsoever.
Okay.
Basically, they would up the strength of the drugs that I'm taking. That's very typical. If things aren't working, it can't be what I've prescribed. We just need to increase the dose, etc. It's
Right.
that kind of thing. And of course,
Yeah.
you're doing the right thing in terms of diet. It wasn't like I was eating any more or any less. Unless you're really ill, like I was during flare-ups, and then sometimes your body's like, you don't eat anything or drink, you get cravings for different things. But it wasn't very helpful because I was just eating a little bit of everything. And so it wasn't a good experiment. They never tested me for gluten. They never said like, well, what do you actually eat? What is your diet like? What do you drink? How often do you drink alcohol? One of the first doctors I saw said, drink a beer a night. He actually said, drink a beer a night. This will help your movements be more regular. I think he was thinking along the lines of, I'm having problems like it's constipation along with ulcerative colitis and bleeding and there's strain. I don't know. But this is what he suggested. And I mean, that's just criminal advice. I mean,
Mhm.
you've got acetaldehyde, it's fructose, and there's gluten, and there's probably glyphosate, all just in this soup that we call beer. And it's just not something you want to have if you've got gut problems. Absolutely not. But
Oh.
anyway, so now they're trying me on food, and it all went well. I'm having bread and butter. I had Pringles, like I say. They were sort of saying, like, this is really good. You can eat these because that's going to be very good for your output, as if that's the biggest health marker that they're looking for, just like the output, the consistency. And of course, now I'm also starting to wash and stand and walk. And then I started to change and clean the stoma myself to the point where they're happy that, okay, you can walk, you can stand, you can wash, you can change your own bag. Here's the company. This is how you place your orders, etc. They gave me a pamphlet to go home with. And I was there for I think it was about 12 days. I think I was in there for less time after my surgery than I was there before my surgery, which is interesting.
Right.
And then I went home, obviously, and went home with my mum and dad. That's where I stayed. My brother was there at the time as well. And I just remember feeling quite happy because I was quite excited to get a little bit more sleep because I was obviously being disturbed quite a bit. And they come around and check your blood pressure a lot. I was looking forward to getting some different food other than this sort of slop and gruel that they served in the hospital. Anyway, went to bed that night and woke up the next day. They all checked to see if I was okay and all went to work. And so now I have this house to myself. And I just remember my thoughts got very, very loud. It was like an anticlimax, I'd sort of got quite excited about going home and seeing, friends, family that hadn't visited me, etc., getting back to my old routines. But it was a bit of a shock, really. I don't think that I couldn't predict the way I was going to feel. And all of a sudden, I just hated this thing, really, really hated it. I didn't like the way it looked. It affected my sleep. I thought that people could see it through my clothes. I started to get a lot of dark shirts. Funny, I never really wear shirts. I'm wearing a shirt today, but I would get a lot of patterned shirts, dark shirts, so it would kind of throw your eyes off, so you wouldn't be able to see it under the clothes. And so it really started to affect me. And because I wasn't sleeping very well, because I felt restricted to my back, it was just a vicious cycle. And so lack of sleep, a pretty unhealthy outlook, not feeling particularly confident, quite insecure about this new thing. And that was basically now my life. And I couldn't really see a positive future. I just thought, like, where am I going to go from here? Believe it or not, a number of years goes by and I'm sort of going up and down with bouts of depression. They come and go in waves, kind of thing. I met my partner actually as a window cleaner. I used to clean her windows and we sort of built up a rapport. Her sister's husband has a bag, and so she was familiar with this. She'd been on a holiday
Right.
with a guy with this bag, and they'd sort of had this little private place, a villa, so that he can kind of feel comfortable in that environment. So she was familiar. It wasn't like a weird thing to her. And so we talked and we just got closer, and that's basically my partner now.
Oh,
We own this
fantastic.
house. So I never saw that coming. The crazy thing is that I would still inevitably go in and out of feeling somewhat depressed. And again, a number of years goes by because, I mean, I had my colon removed in my 20s, my late 20s, but I found carnivore at sort of 35 years old. And so it was quite some time afterwards. I went straight back to eating all the same foods, thinking this is still healthy. I was just unlucky. Still thought grains were healthy, brown rice, broccoli. I was snacking on almonds. I'd have oats in the morning with goji berries, cinnamon and apple. It sounds super healthy.
Absolutely.
I think if you said that to most people, they'd probably think, oh, wow, you got a healthy diet. But I just didn't know anything at the time, So basically going forward, things would get worse again. And it's almost like when you have that proclivity for depression, I think you're never safe, and it sort of just comes out of nowhere sometimes. And it got really, really bad again. It got to the point where I was like, I can't really manage. I don't think I can cope by myself. I didn't really want to go and seek therapy because I thought, well, I know me better than anybody else. What could someone tell me about me that I don't already know?
Right.
I overanalyzed everything, very introspective. I've always been a very deep thinker, quite neurotic, maybe for that reason. It was kind of part of my personality.
Right.
And so I kind of like, well, is that going to help me? I didn't really like the sound of drugs. I've heard so many bad stories about people that start these sort of antidepressant drugs, and it's like they up dose, you become dependent, you take them out of your lifestyle, and all of a sudden the problems come back. And so I was like, I don't really like the idea of that. But at the same time, I couldn't cope very well on my own, and things were visibly getting worse for me. And so reached back out to my GP, went back down there and explained my situation. He then arranged for We're With You, which is like a special unit, to call me. And we had this very long conversation, about 45 minutes. And I actually felt quite good because I was talking to a complete stranger, just getting absolutely everything off my chest, things I hadn't shared with a lot of people. And I remember that day they asked me if I drank alcohol, and I said yes, but I'm not. It's not like I wake up in the morning and drink alcohol. I might have some in the evening a few times a week. They were like, maybe if you can, drop the alcohol. That's going to help. That's the first thing I did. The moment I came off of that call, I just said, I'm not drinking any alcohol anymore. And so that's what happened. I was now awaiting a second call, and this was most likely going to be the one where they would say, right, this is how we're going to treat you, because they just gathered a bunch of information during the first call, basically. And that call never came. So I was sort of waiting for days, and then I waited weeks, and then I started to figure like perhaps something went wrong and they've forgotten about me. I've still not heard anything from them. So they definitely did forget about me, which is kind of nuts if you think that I was explaining that I wasn't particularly excited to wake up most days. Life was unacceptable to me. And so it's pretty crazy that happens, that, how many people have not found an answer and been forgotten about. It's just a bit worrying, really. But anyway, so 2 months goes by and I'm just sitting on the settee and watching YouTube, and Michaela Peterson's anecdote pops up on the Low Carb Down Under channel under the title Don't Eat This. I didn't know what it was about.
This is Jordan Peterson's daughter.
That's correct, yeah. And it's interesting because I first heard about the carnivore diet, whatever that is, from Jordan Peterson, and just thought, oh, wow, okay, that's pretty crazy. Poor guy can only eat beef. That sucks. I remember thinking that. That's all I eat now. But it's funny that his daughter was the one that inspired me to take the leap of faith. It was her story, because when she was up there on stage, she looked very healthy. She was very confident. She was walking back and forth, explaining a story. And I was like, wait a minute, she suffers from all these autoimmune issues. She was severely depressed. She eats only red meat and all that's gone. And she's off of this plethora of medications. I was sold on the spot. I just watched the video and was blown away. And I was kind of like, I think I'm going to try this because I'm on my own, evidently. I've got no help. I don't really want to get the ball rolling again. Let's see what happens. So that's what I did. And I'm quite pessimistic. I wasn't like, oh, this is going to work for me and believe in it and all this kind of stuff. I just tried it and hoped for the best. And for about 2 weeks, I did struggle with energy. And I was like waiting, is this going to happen? Is this going to happen? It doesn't seem right. I looked at my plate. It doesn't look right. That can't be right. It's lacking. Where's the colours? And so, but overnight, when I started the BBBE challenge, so beef, butter, bacon and eggs, me and my partner both did this. She jumped in with me to support me, basically. So overnight, my acid reflux went. I have not had any acid reflux for about 2 years and 9 months. So that was kind of convenient. It wasn't pressing. It wasn't something that was really a big issue because I was so depressed. It was like background. But I did notice that immediately went. About a week goes by and my skin starts to clear up. So I have got quite a few marks. You won't see it so much here, but I had a pretty bad acne when I was eating the balanced diet. I had acne on my back start to develop a little bit later. It was interesting. And after about 2 weeks, that was gone, like pretty much completely gone. You could see little traces of where things were, but it was like clear and my skin had just cleared up. And after 2 weeks, my energy started slowly coming around. I didn't feel so tired at the end of the day. I think my body was obviously getting into its own rhythm and momentum with this new way of eating. I wasn't used to eating predominantly fats. I was always eating carbs. Like I said, I was eating 5 meals a day. And so my body's physiology and the way it was used to, its metabolism and its rhythm and momentum, totally different from the carnivore diet or a carnivore diet, the BBBE. And so after 2 weeks, started to get better and better. And on day 21, this is the magical day for me. I went out to work. I skipped breakfast that day. It was a nice sunny day, and I'd done the work the morning, and I had to pull over because I realized I was just so happy. I was really positive. I enjoyed people's company, the customer relations. I was having nice conversations, appreciating nature. I loved the weather, the breeze, the birds, the trees. And it's like my eyes just like opened, and I woke up from a coma that day, and everything was clear, and I didn't dislike being me. It was like, it's okay to be me. This is fine. Yeah. Pulled over and recorded it on my phone in the moment, and uploaded it to Facebook. At this time, I didn't have a YouTube account. I just couldn't believe it. And part of me was like, am I recording this too soon? But I was so excited about it because I'd not felt like that for so long. Just unbelievable amounts of time that I had not felt like it, light, just very light, and no weight pushing on me. I didn't feel kind of inflamed. I could think clear. I could speak clearly. It's very difficult to describe it. Just everything. It was like I got a new lens, or someone, I can only imagine it's like someone that can't see that can now see. It was like that it was that different night and day.
This video you're referring to, is this the one when you're in your van?
Yeah, that's the. I think it was the very first one I uploaded on my.
Yes. I've watched that video, and I would absolutely recommend to anyone that's interested to watch it. You can see it's very positive, but it's almost like a sense of disbelief in yourself that you can't believe the difference it's made to you.
Yeah, 100. I can't agree more with that, because that was exactly the situation. Like, you're feeling a certain way, but you're like, how? But is it that simple? Like, what just happened? I've been miserable for so long, and now I'm not. I feel good. Like I said, I mentioned a bunch of things in that video as well. Like, I noticed even on day 21, I wasn't sweating or burning in the sun, because it was basically summertime at that point, or the end. I think we were coming close to the end of summer, but it was still hot. We had some hot weather, and I'm very pasty. Like this. It's hard. People think I probably look paler than I am. Often I got this big wish-washy sort of light coming from the window over there, but I don't have a lot of balance from this side. But I would typically go very, very pink, very, very red. My nose, back of my neck, ears. I mean, this bit here would always get hit pretty badly. I've gone on ski holidays and just sat for a couple of hours while we're taking a break, and gone back to the hotel and bubbled in the sun and all the reflection on a ski holiday in February. And so I was very, very sensitive. And now I can go outside and lay in the peak of summer all day and I will not burn. Zero. And so these sort of benefits were very shocking and surprising to me. I had also learned a fair bit as well, because I suppose I was like, how, what causes acid reflux? Because mine's just gone. What is acne? Because my acne's cleared up. What causes acne? Because I thought it was about diet and cleanliness and things like that. I would change my pillowcase every night because I was suffering so much with my skin. And all of a sudden now it's like, even, I don't burn, I don't sweat. It just felt cool as a cucumber working out there, all day, winter cleaning in the peak of summer. Yeah, it was just an amazing turnaround.
From day 21?
All on day 21 this happened. This all happened in 3 weeks. And I recorded that in that video and spoke about a lot of this stuff, being able to speak, being able to think, not burning, not sweating, depression's gone, acid reflux gone, acne's gone. That was 3 weeks. And so I understand for a lot of people that might, I don't know how to put it really, not be annoying. Like, I'm just thinking for some people, they try this diet or a variation, of what I've done and what other people are doing, and they maybe hope for such a quick turnaround. And maybe some of the problems don't go as quickly. I have a funny theory about this, and for some reason, I think it may have to do with the fact that I had my colon removed, because I didn't have this crazy biome that was almost a level of inertia to the biome, if you like, the type of biota that I had, and then switching overnight, and then that trying to reconfigure again, and resolve and all this kind of stuff, which is often why when people switch overnight from any diet to another diet, they can have a lot of, cramps, diarrhea, constipation, lethargy, brain fog. You can have almost the contrary to what we're trying to achieve, because there's like disorder going on now, that you found the rhythm in the chaos, even if it's a bad diet. And now there's disorder because you've switched. And it's like, well, what's happening? Wait a minute, I've got to try and make more bile here. There's a load of fat coming in and all this kind of stuff. And so in my opinion, because I didn't have that, gut microbiome would be very, very minuscule in compared to other people's, whether it's somewhat relocated or it's just what naturally reside in my terminal part of the ileum, etc. There was probably a quicker turnaround for me for that reason. That's just my theory. But what I do understand is that I was obviously on carbohydrates, glycolysis, all the time, multiple times a day, up and down with energy, up and down with moods. And probably at the same time, obviously I'd already destroyed my colon. I think I was just destroying my digestive tract in general with things like gluten, fiber that's indigestible, different other plant proteins. Alcohol certainly wouldn't help. Seed oils certainly don't help. And of course, medications as well. So I think there was a big combination, multifactorial culprits, if you like, coming in from this eat everything in moderation type of thing. And it just didn't fare well. But of course, now on the other side of things, colon's gone, depression's now gone. This was a 30-day challenge, basically. And obviously 21 days later, I've still got 7 days to go and I already feel fantastic. I was like, I'm obviously not going back. There's no way I wouldn't even want to take the chance. And so I saw out the rest of the 30 days. After that point, things just got better, really. I was able to eat more fat. So it just takes time, you know, and my cravings slowly but surely went. And so I would say that took around about 4 months. I think I made a mistake in introducing cheese, which I just thought, oh, well, it's animal, it's carnivore. I don't know whether that really helps in terms of cravings. I think when you get rid of the dairy, that really helps you to not think about things like anything sweet.
Right.
The diet sort of evolved a little bit. So I would try some fish, different cuts of meat, like lambs. I was doing all sorts, you know, bacon stuffed lambs, hearts, and just really pushing the boat out. But these days I'm on a lion diet, what I would call a modified lion diet. I eat fatty beef, fatty lamb every single day, once a week, sometimes twice. I'll incorporate some fish. So mackerel, it's all wild. So wild mackerel, salmon, scallops. I've had lobster and that kind of stuff. I've given up dairy and I've even stopped eggs now. I'm not saying I've quit eggs for good, but I just don't feel as optimal. And I noticed that quite recently,
Right.
about cooking my eggs. Just could almost feel like I'm digesting food again. And when I eat a lion diet, which is just obviously fatty ruminant meat alone, I don't have that. I address hunger and nourishment, and then when my body lets me know, okay, I don't want any more, and I just feel like I'm not hungry anymore. I don't feel like I'm full or stuffed or I'm processing a meal. I can go out and exercise, which is kind of strange. Not that I would recommend that, but that's how I feel. I don't feel like I've got to now sit down and lay down. Oh my God, I've eaten so much. I'm not even aware of the digestion process.
Right.
But I can't say the same. Certainly if I had any plants in, certainly if I have any kind of seed oils. I've accidentally had seed oils once, and so I know what that feels like. And it's amazing when your body lets you know that that's a bad thing to put in the body, because you lose your ability. The body loses its ability to do that. If you were to smoke a cigarette, your first cigarette, you'd cop, it's horrible. But 10 years down the line, you're smoking 40 a day. It's like that goes away. Your body's not telling you it's bad anymore. In fact, you go, oh, what I need to smoke more. Same with alcohol. You know, you have one beer and it probably does the job for a while, but then all of a sudden you're having 2 to do the same job, 3 to do the same job. Your body loses its ability to tell you, probably shouldn't be ingesting this. It's not very good. It's not very healthy. And so when you take this stuff out for long enough, you only have to reintroduce things and you instantly get a signal from the body, stop consuming that. And that's true of seed oils. That's true of, what else did I do? I ate blackberries very, very, very early on, the very end of the summer. I was like, well, it's natural, it's local, it's ancestrally consistent. They're blackberries. They're not being sprayed with glyphosate. I went over and picked a load and had 1 sitting's worth of blackberries after my meal, and never again. I'm not doing it ever again. It's the fiber. It's just a nightmare. My digestion was off. It wasn't pleasant. And then the moment that the blackberries, the fiber basically is trying to kink around the corner and empty into the bag, it's just a nightmare. It really is. And so that was the last day for sort of any kind of experiments, really. The seed oils wasn't my fault. It was a bit of an accident.
What effect did you notice with the seed oils, Lee?
Seed oils, but around about my solar plexus, I felt like a warm, radiating sensation. It was really strange. I wouldn't say it was painful. It was definitely uncomfortable. There was levels of discomfort, but I was just off. It just didn't feel right. I knew straight away. I was like, that's not right. And it didn't look right. It didn't taste right. You know, because when you only eat meat and salt and eggs, salt, fish, whatever, if someone added like a sprinkle of paprika on your eggs or a touch of pepper on your steak, you know it's there straight away. And so I knew, and I was like, okay, well, when in Rome, you know, and paid for it. And for a couple of days, I wasn't right. It took me, I think it always takes for me around about 3 days, if anything like that happens. Just like I've consumed a little bit too much milk before, probably above 50 grams of carbohydrate perhaps in that day, along with the trace glycogen in the meat, etc., eggs, whatever, probably gone over 50 or out thereabouts, and just felt a bit moody, just felt like less of an adult, you know, and being able to deal with situations. And it took me 3 days after I've gone, right, don't do that again. It takes me about 3 days. And I think the reason why is perhaps is that a level of inertia again with how your metabolism is. If I was to now go back and eat carbohydrates, it will probably take me 3 days to come out of beta oxidation back into glycolysis, and then you gain momentum there. For the first 3 days, you're not going to pass your, glucose tolerance test or whatever. It's so ridiculous. But of course, 3 days later, well, now I can, because now I have this inertia, the things are working, and they're sort of for glycolysis. You've got this Randa cycle where you have this cross inhibition of fats and carbs. If you're predominating one and you keep it that way, you have momentum. It's quite difficult to sway the body over to utilizing this. And of course, you do that by predominating the carbohydrates over the fats. But 3 days later, now you're just like someone that's been eating carbohydrates all their life,
Right.
Maybe with less inflammation, but you're gaining this other momentum. You're in a different gear, if you like. And so, yeah,
Do you ever deviate from your diet?
No, nope.
Knowingly, you never deviate.
No. So for me, it's just not worth it. I don't want to be depressed again. I don't want to do experiments. And apart from anything else, it's not that. It's like, because of what I've learned, it's not like I'm in a position where I feel like what works for me is actually also bad for me. Does that make sense? So it's not like I think, my depression has gone this way, but it's going to give me a heart attack. With what I've learned, I don't believe that eating only fatty ruminant meat to satiety every single day, adding salt to taste and drinking water to thirst, I don't think that's going to take years off of my life. The way I would look at it, if my energy's up, my sleep's better, I don't burn, I don't sweat, my acid reflux is gone, my acne's gone, and my depression is gone, why would the thing that did that also be bad for me? That just doesn't make any sense. Not wanting to be alive is pretty bad for anyone, and constantly craving food when I have energy on me. The moment you become fat adapted, if someone says, sorry, mate, you're going to have to fast for 3 days, I wouldn't, all right, well, that's, I wouldn't mind eating.
Do you fast?
Yeah. I don't do it. I don't schedule it. I don't think people should fast like, oh, I fast every Thursday, or I fast, whatever works for you. If you believe in it and you enjoy it, then go ahead. But I do believe that there are obviously massive benefits to fasting. It's a very useful tool to use, but I don't think it should be used if you're not using it as a tool. So if, for example, you had cancer, of course, fast like there's no tomorrow. Feast, and then say, all right, I'm going to fast for as long as possible, then go at it again for another week or 2 weeks, feast. Right, I'm going to fast for longer this time, and keep doing that. If you have autoimmunity, if you're simply not hungry, of course you should fast. But for me, me personally, I eat every single day, usually once. Fatty red meat, like I say, every now and again incorporate some fish, and I would only fast if I felt like I needed a reset, if there was inflammation, if I've had I don't know, my circadian biology's out of whack, sometimes fasting and things like this. So it's just a nice reset. Or if you just fancy it, you want to challenge, you want to do a 3-day dry fast or something. I've done a 5-day water fast because I had actually a skin thing develop. I think that was probably dairy. I instantly cut out all dairy at that point. So I was on the carnivore diet, had around my stoma a skin condition develop. I'm trying to think what it was called now. And very, very severe. It actually kills dogs. Super painful. I thought I would address by immediately taking out dairy, because I thought if there's bacteria that's feeding on any kind of sugar, well, the sugar's in the dairy. I can't think that it would be feeding on the trace amounts of carbs in meat. So I took the dairy out, and I said, well, on top of that, I'm going to do a 5-day fast, and did that. And it kind of cleared up, which is interesting. So I don't know which one worked, but I did 2 things that changed. But I have also done a 4-day dry fast, and can you believe that was easier? So no water, no food for 4 days. That was easier than the 5-day water fast with electrolytes. And I think the reason why, at least for me, I often wake up in the morning and I'll just hydrate a little bit. I maybe just drink sort of 75 to 100 milliliters of water with some electrolytes or salt in it. But when I drink, and if you drink a little bit more, you kind of build up an appetite. I just picture like an animal drinking from a lake. It's like, next thing you're going to do is go and hunt, and then most likely when we ate, even as humans, I can't imagine we would have eaten and then always just drank loads of fluid afterwards. And so I think that often we would have hydrated, and then we build up an appetite, and then we go eat, and we eat a lot of meat and a lot of fat. And so we're creating a lot of our own water internally. And so there was probably less of a demand to go out and actually drink. And we certainly didn't just carry around some Buxton bottled water and sip it every time that we thought, I forgot to drink, and just drink for the sake of it. And so for me, the fact that I don't get up and drink, I don't build up the same level of an appetite. You do get to that point when you would typically eat and you think, oh, I wouldn't mind. But all you've got to do is just go, no, I'm not going to eat. A few hours goes by, it's ready for bed, say. You wake up the next day, and now I'm like, I feel amazing. So once I do that, I just miss the next day eating with no fluids. The next day, my energy is like through the roof. Cognition is so clear. My ability to think and speak is better than right now. So right before we got on, I just ate a big tomahawk. And so I'm my way of articulating my sentences won't be as clear. Like if I was going to have a debate or I needed to take a test, I would just fast, because I think you enter this sort of hunting mode where everything just functions optimally. Like all your senses are just hypersensitive. And so you're able to speak and think. And yeah, that's what I like about the fasting, is that. Also, I do get a bit of a rest from emptying and changing my bag as often, because obviously I've stopped eating. And so it's kind of convenient, even on a carnivore diet, though that it's a breeze to digest meat. It's kind of a break even from that. And so I enjoy it, but I wouldn't say it's necessary to do if you feel good. I think only if you want to kind of use it as a tool, reduce inflammation, get out of trouble, address cancer meaningfully. That's definitely reasons why we should fast.
Fantastic. Thank you. And you mentioned a few times there that you're focused on ruminant animals.
Yeah.
Do you ever eat things like chicken, pork? And if so, is there a reason that you focus on the ruminant animals?
So I had tried, obviously, bacon in the beginning. I kind of paired it with everything and it went with everything. Love my bacon. Now, no desire to eat bacon. It's too salty, can you believe? And I'm someone that's supposed to add a lot of salt because I don't have a colon, but I just don't really crave bacon. I then realized that before I went carnivore, I was eating chicken as my main meat source and protein source. I hadn't eaten any chicken and it had been like a few months. And so I thought, I'm going to try some chicken. Interestingly, just didn't do it for me like steak did. And I wasn't someone that would eat a sort of a rare steak or anything like that. All of a sudden now I'm only craving steak. Bacon's come out. Tried chicken, sort of a little bit of almost like a disappointment, thinking, oh, chicken's not so great anymore. I don't know why that is. I probably had chicken 3 or 4 times in 2 years and 9 months. I just don't really eat it. Bacon, like I say, that was a thing in the beginning. I probably had maybe, 100 times and then just 0 now. I just don't even want bacon. The only pork that I will have very, very occasionally, maybe 3-4 weeks or something like that, is like an Iberico pork chop. And the reason why is because they're not conventional factory farmed pigs. They're outside in the open. They're free to roam into forests and they eat almost exclusively acorns. So you can eat this pork raw. I eat it raw. And sometimes I will sear the outside. It's like butter, this stuff. It's absolutely amazing. Got a bit of a different taste as well, but I believe that that's a decent source. If I crave it, maybe I want more B1, K2, D3, maybe, just a different source for variety. For whatever reason, I'm not going to say, no, you can't have that. I'll just eat some Iberica pork. Chicken, I'm not opposed to it. If someone really enjoys chicken and it works for them, I'm not opposed to it. I would say, obviously, if you can, purchase some pastured chickens and not sort of factory farmed. I think the more we support local farmers and the high quality produce that you can afford, the better. I understand that some people aren't in a position where they can justify getting some, more expensive chicken that's pastured from a pasture for life butchers. Of course, that's going to be far more money than your cheap conventional chicken in Tesco's, for example. But other than that, it's the reason why I predominate ruminant meat. First of all, it's the most ancestrally consistent food that we've eaten as human beings. Our genetic package hasn't changed, our epigenetics may have, but not our genetics. And so that's why we want to predominate that. It's very nutrient dense. But another reason is because they have 4 stomachs and the ruminants that I eat are organic. They're finished on grass. They process what they eat and turn it into just pure nutrition. There's no culprits even in the fats, no toxins. And that's why the most sensitive people on the planet, like Michaela Pitson, Jordan, Tammy Pitson, and even myself, we thrive. We do very, very well on ruminant meat. The moment we introduce other things, there's subtle problems. I have eaten on this diet chicken. I had quite a few drumsticks and wings. The other times I kind of paired it with my red meat. But I have had sort of chicken and eggs and things like that. And I ate too much chicken, obviously. It was like I had a seed oil. It was similar, like getting there. Not as bad, but again, you think about what they're fed. It's probably grain. The omega-6 to omega-3 ratios are way out compared to what we're used to, what we evolved on. And so it may be to do with that. And I think if you just put a little bit in every now and again, if you fancy it, it's fine. Certainly if you're sensitive, you don't want to do it all the time. But I think if you overdo it all in one hit, or you do like 2-3 days in a row, some of your symptoms start to come back. And I think it's just evidence that the monogastric meat isn't so beneficial. It's not as advantageous for a person who's sensitive, especially with autoimmunity. I think obviously the problems are in the fats with what they've been eating. You can taste often what they've eaten, and it's tampered with. The fact that they're given something different that they wouldn't gravitate towards naturally in a wild setting. The nutrition value, the profile in the fats, it's not quite where it wants to be, where it needs to be. But ruminant meat, even if it's finished on grain and the polyunsaturated fats are out of whack a little bit, for some reason you can still thrive on it. You can eat it and do really, really well. I definitely notice a difference though if I eat grain over grass, and I've only had a bit of grain here and there when You see a nice cut and you think, oh, it is a nice bit, I'll get that.
Yeah.
But I always preference grass-fed. I can taste the difference. I know if it's grass-fed, not just by looking at it, but by smelling it and tasting it. And I believe that we should be supporting that way of farming. And it's just more nutritious. If you look at the fatty acid profiles, you look at the nutrients when they're outside and they're eating what they're supposed to eat, that's the best food that we can eat as human beings.
Thank you. And you obviously you never eat fruit and veg. So what would you say to someone who is advising as a necessity that we should be eating fruit and veg? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I would simply start by saying there is no such thing as an essential plant, carbohydrate, fiber, or polyphenol. They don't exist. So that's one thing that I would say to someone who's like, but you don't eat any fruit and vegetables. I think that it's quite, sensible to just put it that way. Like, we don't need them. So I understand you probably believe that there's a lot of beneficial nutrition in a vegetable or a fruit, for example, like we've been told. So many of us think that carrots contain vitamin A. They don't. They contain carotenoids. Animal fats and liver, for example, contains vitamin A. Blood, retinol, that's provitamin A. So carrots, we have to make a conversion, and many people actually struggle to make this conversion, often at 20-1. And so it's not that great. They're not good for your eyes. Retinol is what we want. No fruit or vegetable contains B12. No plant in the world contains DHA or EPA. It's the algae, which is neither kind of like an animal or a plant, if you like. But fruits and vegetables as well, if you think about it, they're kind of man-made inventions. So if you look at like an old apple, you'd have these tiny little sour things. And now they're these big, humongous sweet things that are available all year round. Same can be said for exotic fruits. You think like bananas. As a window cleaner, I see a lot of what people have in their pantry. I always see bananas, oranges, and lemons. So I always use this example. I think a lot of people eat bananas in the morning. They think it's a very healthy food. Their doctors recommend them, often nutritionists, etc. People squeeze lemon onto their food or into their water, and they'll cut up an orange because they think I'm getting my daily amount of vitamin C. Every single one of those things have never grown in this country, ever. So the light that gave birth, if you like, to these foods is in a different position to where we are. And so it's like microwaving your food. Consuming a food that's come from another region around the planet, the information is chaotic to someone in a different position to where that food was grown, which is why a lot of people, when they go carnivore, will see so much of a benefit because it's local mostly that we're eating. So I'm eating all British beef, British lamb. I mean, I can see a lot of my food from my house pretty much. And so it's very, very beneficial because it's local. So if you're eating a banana in December in the UK, there's nothing right about that. If you want to get potassium, you don't need to consume just a load of sugar and fiber. If you look at how bananas looked before we got our hands on them, they were tiny little things full of bitter seeds. We've hybridized them and engineered these things to be bigger, colourful, sweeter, and available all year round. And then they ship them all over the planet, and they tell us that they're really, really healthy. But of course, we're talking about mostly sugar and fiber, which is an indigestible polysaccharide, so lots of sugars we can't digest. And of course, you don't have the beneficial bioavailable forms of things like iron, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin K. They're in sort of a form that the body has to transmute into the bioavailable form, which we can get straight from meat. And so people will cut the fat off. Fat's really bad for us. Well, that contains vitamins A, D, E, K. If you replace fats with carbs, you didn't replace vitamins A, D, E, and K. So, right.
Are there any vitamins in plant foods that you can't obtain from meat?
No, not that we need, and not that's of any additional benefit to eating meat. So polyphenols and all this kind of stuff, there are no essential polyphenols. People will go on about these things, but often they're just anti-nutrients. They'll say plant nutrients. No, they're plant toxins. So people will say curcumin from turmeric is an antioxidant. But it's not an antioxidant. It's a toxic plant. You put it in the body recognizes this oxidative stress, and so it upregulates its own master antioxidant glutathione. And so we see this association, and people go, oh, look, turmeric and curcumin and pepperine and all these things, the antioxidants in plants, they're not antioxidants, they are pro-oxidants. But we just see our own antioxidant coming up to combat that. And actually what happens is your baseline level of glutathione drops below where it was. So it's not even a hormetic response. It's not like building muscle, for example. I would argue that that's not even that healthy. But, so there aren't really any beneficial properties that we can consume from plants that we won't get from meat, but that it is vice versa. So if you only ate plants, you're not getting EPA and DHA, you're not getting like sufficient levels of choline, you're not getting carnitine, you're going to have to synthesize that. That's going to be at detriment to vitamin C. If you're consuming glucose, and carbohydrates break down to glucose a lot of the time, you know, starch, for example, that's going to deplete absorption of vitamin C or compete for absorption, so you're getting less vitamin C. All the time you're eating whole plant foods, I would say that's better than taking the juice out of it, for example, like a fruit. But if you're eating whole plant foods, you're only going to absorb maybe 40% because it's full of fiber. And that fiber not only ends up down the toilet, but it can cause problems along the way, and it blocks nutrients. And so why do we eat? We don't eat to block nutrients. We don't eat things that get in the way of nutrient absorption. Gluten, for example, can damage microvilli, and those things, like these little hairs around in the small intestine, are what pull in the nutrients. And so if you're eating whole grains, you're eating sugar, fiber, and gluten, and all of these things can damage the integrity of your gut lining and your ability to pull in nutrients. It's also getting in the way of, you know, utilizing fats for fuel, which creates more energy. And so if you're eating carbohydrates like whole grains, you're getting less energy, you're flooding your body with sugar, you're overworking your pancreas, you're supplying your body with endocrine disruptors. You can cause permeability from like lectins, like phytohemagglutinin and gluten, and that's also damaging microvilli. So the more you eat that, the less nutrition you'll be able to actually assimilate. And so that's a bit counterintuitive to why you would even eat in the first place.
Could you explain to the listeners, Lee, what a lectin is?
A lectin is a plant protein. So gluten is very, very well known. So the problem with plant proteins have a very particular structure and shape. Now, we're made of animal cells. Cows are obviously made of animal cells. When we eat animal proteins, the body breaks them down into amino acids and they're liberated, and then they flood the system, and then we rebuild these protein structures wherever it's necessary in the body. A plant protein takes a different shape, and the body knows this. And so when it enters the stomach, we can't break the bonds of these proteins. So you've got gluten, and then you've got this aspect called gliadin, and it's this gliadin part we can't break the bonds. And so often we have protein structures that are larger than a tripeptide. So a tripeptide, 3 amino acids chemically bonded together. If it's larger than that, and that's gone through your stomach, your body won't be able to assimilate those nutrients. You won't pull it into the bloodstream. And so what happens is it tumbles down the small intestine with an electrical charge, by the way, because we're electrical and everything chemically that we consume is electrical. It will zap your microvilli and damage them, and it will short them and destroy their ability to pull in nutrients. But of course, we also know that it can open these tight junctions, these protein structures, and this is what permeability is, intestinal permeability, aka leaky gut. So these superfoods have actually poked holes in your intestines, open up these junctions, and then lectins, again, once you have this situation, can slip through the cracks. The reason why is because they're not being assimilated. They haven't been broken, liberated properly and reabsorbed. They're kind of tumbling through, and some of them can slip through the holes in your intestine. And this, of course, upsets all autoimmunity. All autoimmune diseases sit on a foundation of a leaky gut. And so this is why a ruminant-only diet is the best way forward, because not only do you enter phases of nutritional ketosis, it's very therapeutic, but you're actually eating the only substrate that allows the body to fix these protein structures, to actually close the junctions and seal the gut. And so plant proteins don't offer the same information that animal proteins do. They're also not complete from different sources. You have to kind of get some peas, get some broccoli, get some legumes and peanuts and put it all together to get amino acids, but they're all out of whack. If you look at the ratios in meat, for example, they're in the right ratios because we're made of animal cells and we're carnivorous. But if you look at the proteins in plants, again, they're all out of whack. You've got really high levels of leucine in this, but really low over here, and not enough branched chain aminos here. And again, they're not in the form that's bioavailable. And so people can look at a packet, plant protein, you get 50 grams of protein. It's like, well, how much are you going to actually assimilate?
Yes.
It's not what's on the packet. And then if you're eating gluten, and you're having fiber, it's going to deplete. It's going to diminish again. Say that 50 is more like 30. Well, now it's more like 20, because you're destroying your ability to pull these things in anyway. And if you're not eating properly and your stomach isn't acidic enough, you're not breaking these foods down enough anyway. And so this is why so many people can't break down plant proteins, because they're eating too many plants to begin with. They're drinking too much water. They're alkalizing the stomach acid. People that have acid reflux don't have enough acid. It's not caused by acid. It's caused by diet and lifestyle. It's metabolic. Just like cancer is all metabolic. And so if we eat inappropriately and we live inappropriately, we find ourselves in these new sort of chronic diseases that we've never really heard of. Sort of 500 years ago, a lot of these things barely heard of. And now they're rife, and it's almost like you flip a coin. If you're an 85-year-old woman, you might have Alzheimer's. It's just absolutely absurd. And so it is about getting back to how we are designed to eat, or how we're created to eat, whatever you believe. We do have certain machinery. We do have our own setup as a species, and we know we've got carnivore stomachs. Forget that. I understand we've got canine teeth and eyes facing forward, but there's other parts of our anatomy, the small cecum and the appendix, the colon, half the size relative to other primates. We've got small colons. We're not hindgut digesters, right? We're not herbivores. And so this all tells a very clear story, and it's not just my opinion. This isn't kind of a nutrition study. This is hard science. Our anatomy, biology, pathophysiology, anthropological data, these are hard sciences that we know we can derive a lot of facts from. For example, we know we can't digest fiber. That's just a fact. Yeah. Ruminants can, only because they possess the machinery, the organisms and the microbes in certain parts of their digestive tract. Hindgut digesters don't digest it thoroughly, but they do enough. Obviously, they're deriving a lot of saturated fats and short-chain fatty acids and things like that from fiber. And so when you look at an ape who's just munching on leaves all day, you look at a ruminant who's just eating grass all day, they're running on fats. They're not running on carbohydrate. And so naturally the animal kingdom in general pretty much runs on fats, and we are designed to do the same. But if we eat carbohydrates, we're not running on fats, because we don't have the same machinery as those guys do. And so that's why we eat a species appropriate diet, lots of fatty ruminant meat, any animal nutrition actually that you do well on. So feel free to do eggs and fish and even dairy if you do well on it.
Do you know whether it's true? I think it's along the lines of what you've just said, that even when you take a ruminant animal like a cow, and people will argue, cows are big and they're strong and that they're eating grass, but it's actually in the stomach that grass is being broken down into sort of a bacterial type protein, and that is what the cow actually feeds on.
Yes. So the cows run on fats because we derive short-chain fatty acids, which are saturated fats. And the organisms and the microbes and things that die, I think that's where they get their protein from. So it's just this cycle. It's this constant cycle. Because we all need fats, essential fatty acids and proteins. There are no essential carbs. I mean, I'm sure that there is for some animals, as in like they need, of course, herbivore, they need to eat carbohydrates. But what I'm saying is the end result, these are precursors. The carbohydrates are precursors, if you like, to providing short-chain fatty acids and saturated fats and, cholesterol and all these sorts of things, are proteins that they derive from grass. You can't just eat grass and go, I'm going to get all the fat and protein I need as a human being, but as a cow you can, or as a deer, or as a sheep, bison, buffalo. These can do that. That's why they're such magical creatures. And of course, they're the only ones that can really graze on this cellulose, this pasture grass, alfalfa, clover. You can't just put any old animal in there. You can't utilize it for anything else. They are the only ones.
And there's definitely something in this carnivore diet. You explain it far better than I ever could. Every carnivore I have met, without exception, looks to be the picture of health. And it's actually what got me looking into it. Because I think you described yourself earlier on as an inquisitive person. I'm very much the same. I'm sort of analysing things, questioning things. And I am someone who very much likes to judge things by what I see for myself rather than what I'm told.
Yeah.
And every carnivore that I've met, without exception, looks to be the picture of health. They look really healthy. They're all very lean. I haven't met an overweight carnivore. And just, again, like you said, lots of energy. There's definitely something in it. But what I do, I mean, I'm so grateful for your input. It's been amazing, and I'm conscious we're sort of around the hour mark, and I don't want to sort of take up too much of your time. It's very kind of you, but if I may just, this is a question I ask everyone that comes onto the podcast. If you could give people just one piece of advice, one thing to change.
Okay, that's really hard. If you said 5, that's easy. 3, 1. Okay, well, I guess I could put it into this box, I guess. So one bit of advice. Okay, imagine we are not in modernity, but, you are you exist in this time, but just picture for a moment 50,000 years ago. How would you have lived? Do that as much as possible. What that means is you're not eating plants from different places around the world multiple times per day. You're not microwaving your food. You're not taking your phone into your bedroom. You haven't got rubber soles on, and you just, you never get out in the natural light. You never show your bare skin to the sun. You've got shoes and socks on all the time. You're never grounded to the earth. You're doing everything that's progress, basically. You know, I would say to revert back, gravitate towards what I would call natural or organic as far as you can in modernity, and cut back on what is synthetic and toxic and what we call often progress. So get your technology out your bedroom, stop microwaving your food, eat seasonal, whatever you eat seasonal, but I would predominate fatty ruminant meat.
Thank you very much, Lee. And if people would like to find out more about you and listen to more of your valuable advice, where can they go to find you?
Pretty much exclusively on YouTube. So I'm under the name Kent Carnivore, and that's where you'll find me. You know, feel free to drop comments, whatever, but I do have an email on there. You should be able to find that. Feel free to reach out. I usually reply. I can't always promise it because I do get a lot of emails and things coming in. It's sort of juggling. Sometimes I try and put stars on the emails to come back to, and I'm sure I'd forget, you know, but that's me anyway.
Once again, thanks ever so much for joining us.
No worries. You bet.
Thank you, Lee.